Have you ever wondered what it was really like to sit at a table in a medieval village with a crust of bread so hard it could break teeth? Or to taste soup so thin it was more memory than meal? You're about to drift into a different kind of history. Not the kind in textbooks, but the kind whispered over a cold stew and told by candlelight. Asterisk, each one revealing the strange, sour, and sometimes heartbreaking truth about food in the Middle Ages. From moldy bread that had to be soaked in ale just to chew it, to onions boiled in muddy water as the only dinner for a week, to salt so precious it was guarded like gold, and fish so foul-smelling it was buried in spice to hide the rot. And yet, people found joy. They sang, they told stories, they dreamed beneath the stars as the story gently flows. You'll float through the life of a dying star, from glowing nebula to fading stardust, paralleling the rise and fall of feasts and famines on earth. Each chapter is a bedtime step deeper into another world, one that's cold but comforting, harsh yet poetic, lonely but never empty. So, if you're ready to relax, to dream, to learn something strange and beautiful while you drift off, then stay. Click play and let's go back to a time when food sucked, but stories fed the soul. The hungry nebulae, poetic bedtime journey through time, taste, and the stars asterisk when you close your eyes tonight, and your breath grows long and slow. Let your thoughts float gently like soup bubbles in a cold, forgotten pot, backward, through centuries cloaked in fog and kingdoms stitched from dust and dreams. Before, there were pans that hissed with garlic and oil. Before the scent of cocoa warmed the winter air. Before the crust of bread turned gold in gentle ovens. There was a world where food was, well, a bit grim. This, the story of why food sucked in medieval times. But fear not, this tale won't leave your belly growling. It's a sleepy stroll through foggy forests, castle kitchens, and mossy fields, told in whispers and warm metaphors. And just above it all, invisible to the hungry lords and barefoot bakers, a baby star is being born in the corner of the cosmos, a nebula swirled like flour in broth, a milky cloud of stardust, whisked by time and gravity's spoon. It didn't shine yet, but it dreamed of it. The same way a peasant might dream of a turnip with flavor, or stew with more than one lonely bone. So hush now, let's begin. Asterisk, once upon a dinner that never quite filled you, there lived a miller named Wren, with flour in his hair and a curse in his cupboard. May the bake with wind and stones. The flour was gray, the bread harder than fence posts, and still people called it a feast. He would rise before the moon had finished setting, mixing sorrow with water, kneading prayers into dew. No butter, no spice, just a crust that could chip your dreams. Out in the village, Lady Mirwin clutched a spoon like it might lead her to flavor. "Turnip again," she whispered, eyeing her reflection in the soup. She'd never met pepper. Cinnamon was a legend, like dragons, too far, too expensive, too magical, and the meat. Ah, if you could call it that. Rabbits caught in traps, half of them bone, the rest hope. Even kings, wrapped in robes, stitched with gold, bit into grisly morsels and wondered quietly what joy might taste like. But don't worry, dear listener. This isn't a tale of sadness, but one of wonder, wrapped in metaphors, like pies with too much crust. Let's drift, shall we? Past the turnip fields, past the mossy moat, past the lonely fire flickering in the baker's cottage. Let's rise, gently, like warm air over a stew pot, into the stars. Asterisk, the nebula hour, glowing kitchen in the cosmos has begun to stir. A light, faint and flickering, nestles in the fog. The baby star yawns. Its warmth will one day be felt in 1,000 kitchens yet to be born. But back on Earth, in the year 1100 something, Lady Mirwin dreams of apples that haven't turned to mush. She dreams of salt, and the wind outside her wooden hut hauls like a kettle left too long on the flame. Sleep now. There's still so much hunger in history, and so many stars to light the way. The crumbling loaf, a rooster crows, like a creaky hinge, its voice carrying over empty fields, dry stalks that used to be wheat. Now just whispers beneath the frost. Morning comes reluctantly to the village of Dunstow-on-Mire. Even the sun seems hesitant, peeking over the hills. Like a shy child at a feast with nothing on their plate, Lady Mirwin wakes to the scent of damp straw. Her breath fogs the air, and the coals in the hearth are sleeping cold, curled up like a cat in a dreamless night. In the corner of her cupboard, a turnip, soft, spotted, somehow still proud, and beside it, a loaf of rye bread so hard it could be used in battle. She slices it anyway slowly, as if trying to find a soft memory hidden inside. But even the knife size, crumbs scatter like tired birds. She dips the bread in boiled water and calls it soup. This was cuisine once. This was survival. Not out of laziness, no, but because the world had not yet tasted color. Spices were like stars, beautiful, distant, smuggled across deserts by dreamers and sold for more than most men earned in a year. A pinch of saffron, a prince's ransom. And so the peasants chewed on stone. Boiled cabbage until it wept. Ate gruel so bland, it felt like forgetting. But let's not pity them too deeply, dear dreamer. For they laughed, too, around fires built from fence posts and hope. They sang, even when the stew was thin. They told stories about food they'd never taste the way we talk about stars we'll never reach. Asterisk. And above them, far above, the baby star stirred again. The nebulous fog, once cool and ghostly, now shimmered with warmth. Hydrogen clasped hydrogen like two peasants holding hands in secret. Pressure built, soft as a rising lullaby. The first flicker of fusion was not unlike the first time Lady Mirwen tasted honey. It happened only once. She remembered it forever. She still dreamed of it even now, even in the cold, golden, sticky sunlight made edible. She'd licked it from her thumb as a girl beneath a willow tree. And her tongue remembered it long after the bees forgot her. Just as the stars remember. Too, every star holds within it the memories of kitchens that never existed, of warmth, of crackling fires and full bellies. You see, even stars long to feed something. Asterisk, the baby star, still hidden in its cocoon, grows hotter, heavier, it hums. Not loudly, not yet, but somewhere in the folds of space, a whisper begins to build. I am becoming. Back on Earth, the villagers are also becoming hungrier, becoming cleverer. They crush herbs that grow in wild places, nettles, sorrel, mustard greens, not for flavor, but for the chance to believe that taste might return someday. And deep in the woods, an old woman stirs her pot of acorns and tears and calls it porridge. She sprinkles ash on top because it reminds her of pepper, and she smiles. Because sometimes pretending is enough. Outside her hut, the stars begin to peek through. The baby star's light is far from Earth, but already it is reaching. It will take millions of years. But light always arrives, just as spices will one day arrive, too, in caravans, creaking through sand. Just as ovens will one day sing, but not yet. Tonight, Lady Mirwen eats her bread-water stew and sighs. She leans back into straw, listens to the wind, closes her eyes, and dreams of apples that crunch, of pie crusts that flake, of butter that whispers secrets to the tongue. Sleep. Now, we've only just begun. Asterisk. The spice that never came. Asterisk. In a distant tower of stone and ivy, a monk named Elric hunched beside parchment, writing recipes that no one would ever follow. He wrote them anyway, not because they were useful, but because dreams are a kind of spice, too bitter at first, but better than nothing in a pot of wine. He scrawled, boil pears until they sing. But there was no wine, not for monks, and the pears were too old to hum. Still, he wrote, he imagined cinnamon, that foreign bark from faraway trees, sweet like kindness, sharp like truth. He'd never tasted it. No one he knew had, but he'd heard the nobles whisper its name like a secret passed through velvet halls. He'd heard of pepper, too, black dust from the edge of the world, so costly it was locked in safes beside crowns. He dipped his quill. Ink flowed like gravy in a dream. He wrote, to taste something unknown is to travel without moving. And in the fire beside him, a log cracked open like a split roast. Even monks were hungry, down in the village. Lady Mirwin's son small Thomas was chasing chickens barefoot. He was 6, and already he'd learned that eggs were treasures laid in secret. He found one. Finally, warm as a hug, nestled in straw beneath a brooding hen. He held it in both hands, ran home like a knight returning from battle. His mother boiled it carefully, cut it in half, gave him the yolk, kept the white for herself. She told him the yellow part was where the sun lived. He believed her. Maybe she did, too. For in a world without cheese, without sugar, without the soft tickle of roasted garlic, an egg was a miracle. Asterisk, above them, the baby star grew restless. Its core had become a furnace where hydrogen danced into helium, slowly, joyfully, a ballet of creation. Its surface rippled, its heartbeat steadied. It was no longer dreaming of light. It was making it, and though it would take eons to reach Earth, the light had already begun its journey. One photon among billions was heading for Thomas. It would not arrive until long after he was gone. But that's the thing about light. Never hurries, it only hopes. Asterisk, the photon passed ancient rocks, gas giants swirling like cauldrons, and ice moons sleeping like old kings. On Earth, Thomas stared into the fire with crumbs on his shirt and warmth in his belly. He had no idea how bad food really was. To him, it was just life. A turnip was a turnip. A crust was a gift. A warm egg was sunrise. Still, Lady Mirwin sat quietly across from him. Her eyes a little too distant, her hunger more emotional than physical. She remembered the rumors that in Italy there was bread so soft it bowed, that in Persia rice shimmered with saffron gold, and she remembered what she'd once tasted as a girl, a single dried fig from a merchant's cart, cooed slowly in secret behind her mother's back. It had tasted like summer, like laughter, like a place beyond turnips. But no merchant came here now. The roads were dangerous. The spice caravans passed them by like forgotten verses. And so, the fig remained in her memory, the spice that never came. Asterisk, the star pulsed, hotter now. Its gravity pulled at everything near dot, and with every beat, with every wave of light, it sent into the void. It whispered to the universe, I am warmth, I am becoming. Back on Earth, the peasants gathered around fires, not to eat, but to remember what eating used to feel like. They told stories of feasts they'd never seen, imagined tables covered in meats, steamed greens, pastries filled with berries and cream dot, and in the telling, they tasted them. A little imagination, too, can be a meal. Asterisk, so. Sleep now, dreamer of stars and soup. The world was hungry, yes, but even hunger had its poetry. There are more tales to tell of black bread and broth, of banquets and bitterness, and the star above us is still growing. We'll follow it again, through flickers and fire, through castles and crumbs. Tomorrow, sleep. Now, asterisk, the boiled feast of kings asterisk. The castle rose like a stone mirage from the moors, a sleeping dragon with too many windows, too few fires. Inside, it was never truly warm. Even with 12 hearths and walls thicker than pride, the wind still whispered through the mortar like a rumor no one wanted to believe. Here lived King Alderic the Stern, whose crown sat heavier than hunger. He dined on silver platters beneath tapestries that told stories his cooks could never recreate. Tonight's feast, boiled meat again, goose, perhaps, or mutton. The servants no longer said. It had been swimming in water for so long it could have been anything, its name lost in the steam. There were vegetables, too, soft as sighs, drained of all memory. Even the bread, though white and rare, tasted like duty. Still, the king chewed slowly, as if flavor might arrive late, like a night delayed by fog. Across the hall, nobles made polite noises, laughter like the clinking of cold spoons. They praised the feast, not for its taste, but for its cost. For in those days, wealth and flavor were not friends. Asterisk, the jester poor soul told jokes about onions, the rare ones, the ones from lands with real sun. Imagine, he said, a sauce that bites back. They laughed, not because it was funny, but because they remembered wanting such things, and forgetting had become dangerous. Asterisk, up above, the star had found itself. It no longer whispered. It sang, a brilliant newborn sun, now blazing in its nursery of dust, sending warmth in every direction, including far far below, to a world still tasting gray dot. It didn't know Earth yet, hadn't met Thomas or Lady Mirwin or King Alderic in his sleepless castle. But its light was on its way, like a spice ship with golden sails, cutting through space toward the cold kitchens of medieval time. Asterisk, back in the great hall, a servant spilled gravy on the flagstones. The nobles gasped, not because it was precious, but because it was gone. A monk, seated at the edge of the hall, scribbled in his book. Again, he wrote, "Even kings dine in shadows. Even feasts can be hollow." Then he looked down at his own meal, a trencher of stale bread, sopping with sadness, and whispered, "But it is still warm. Sometimes that's enough." Asterisk, elsewhere in the kingdom, peasants huddled in barns shared bowls of thin porridge and told stories about what kings must eat. Roasted swans filled with cherries, stew that sings songs, sugar poured from golden fountains. They didn't know it was all boiled, that the only thing royal was the silence, that nobility could not by taste any more than stars could skip their collapse. Asterisk still, we mustn't scorn them too deeply, for the kings were hungry, too, not for food, but for the flavor of meaning, for something warm to cling to in the long, cold corridors of stone. So sleep now, tiny listener, wrapped in blankets. The stars burn bright, but earth is still dim. The light is on its way, and when it arrives, in 1,000 years or more, it will shimmer across golden butter, melt into chocolate, steam from fresh rice, glow in ripe peaches. But first, more darkness, more boiled feasts, more dreams that taste like nothing. Tomorrow, we shall continue. Sleep softly, the sorrows of soup beneath a hill crowned with cold stones. The abbey stood like a folded prayer, still, silent, cloaked in ivy. Its walls had never known garlic, nor its kitchens the thrill of a frying pan inside. Brother Oswin stirred the soup and stirred and stirred. He didn't know why anymore. The pot was already done, but still he moved the spoon, slowly, thoughtfully, as if he might summon taste from the bottom of the silence. It was mostly water, a hint of barley, a few herbs that had once been green, a carrot so thin it looked like regret. He whispered a blessing, not to flavor it, that was impossible, but to forgive it, because even soup feels shame when it feeds without joy. Asterisk, outside, snow pressed its fingers against the windows. The monks had taken a vow of silence, but their stomachs made music in its place. Brother Oswin filled each bowl with the same careful hand, as though pouring liquid gold. But the bowls remained gray. Steam rose like forgotten psalms. One monk, eyes closed, tasted it and smiled, not because it was good, but because it was warm. And in winter, warmth was halfway to happiness. Asterisk above the abbey, above the clouds, above the frozen fields and the bones of forgotten kings, the star continued its luminous song. Its fire danced now in full rhythm, hydrogen to helium, pressure to pulse, gravity to light. Its surface shimmered like soup skimmed with starlight. Each wave of warmth it released was a silent promise to the darkness, I will reach you, even if it takes an eternity. I will arrive. Asterisk, the light had already passed Saturn. It curved past Jupiter, brushed Pluto's icy eyelids. Still, it came, and someday it would kiss the Earth's edge, sneak into the slits of monastery windows, settle on soup bowls, and remind the broth how to hope again, but not yet. For now, the monks sipped quietly, grateful not for flavor, but for each other. And that, too, was a kind of feast. Asterisk, meanwhile, in a nearby hamlet, a mother boiled stones in her pot, so the children would think dinner was on the way. She told them, if you're patient, the stones will melt. They sat, cross-legged by the fire, imagining the stones turning soft, imagining the taste of magic. They fell asleep before the lie broke, and the mother, tears in her apron, watched the stones stare back at her, silent, unchanging like stars. Asterisk, we forget sometimes that not all meals are eaten with the mouth. Some are chewed in the heart. A shared story, a quiet smile, a hand held while hungry. Even the sorrows of soup can be soothed by love. So rest now, let your breath be slow, like steam rising from a monk's bowl. Let your dreams drift into candlelight tomorrow. We will follow the wind to the fields where famine meets folklore, and where the star continues its ancient journey through the silence of space. Sleep softly, asterisk. Fields that forgot how to feed, asterisk. The fields were once faithful. They bloomed beneath bare feet, golden with wheat, gentle with oats, soft as lullabies whispered through barley. But one year, the rains didn't come. Then, the next, they came all at once. The earth, confused, swallowed the seeds, but refused to grow them. And so, the fields forgot how to swell, how to sprout, how to feed the very hands that had cradled them for centuries. Asterisk, in the village of Thornwick, old farmer Ilric sat on a stump, hands calloused and empty. He stared at a row of nothing where onions had once grown bold and proud. His daughter brought him a bowl of broth that tasted like memory and weeds. He smiled anyway, because that's what fathers did, even when the land gave up, even when the cows turned hollow, even when the wind carried away the scent of soil's promise. He smiled because he remembered flavor, and sometimes remembering is the last spice we have. Asterisk at night. Ilric dreamed of wheat dancing, arms linked, grains laughing. A festival of food, drunk on sun. He'd wake up, chewing the air. The dream never lasted. His wife, Marta, counted turnips by candlelight. There were 6, enough for 4 meals. Or 2, if they shared with the neighbors, which they always did, because hunger has manners in kind hearts. Asterisk far above. The star's light pressed onward, now nearing Earth's edge. The first of its rays touched the upper skies, silent, delicate, like fingers brushing the rim of a bowl before lifting the lid. The light didn't fix the famine, not yet, but it warmed the future. It whispered to the seeds buried deep, not now, but soon. And to the cold, still soil, it promised, you will rise again. Asterisk in Thornwick. The villagers told stories by the fire of how the fields had betrayed them, but secretly they all blamed themselves. Had they asked for too much? Had they tilled too hard? Had they lost the language of growth? The priest said it was sin. The widow said it was weather. The children didn't care. They drew bread in the dirt with sticks and laughter, and that was enough. For now, because even fake food can fill real silence. Asterisk, the fields slept beneath snow, dreamless but not lifeless, for deep within the roots a slow pulse remained, like a whisper too shy to speak. And above it all, the star burned on, alive, ancient, and finally near. Its light would take time to reach the mouths of men. But the journey had begun. Asterisk, sleep now, traveler of kitchens and constellations. Let the wheat sway in your dreams, even if it didn't sway today. Let your breath be slow, like wind moving through fallow soil. Tomorrow, we will visit the traveling cooks, the ones who tried to bring taste back with pots on their backs and stories in their sleeves. And the star will continue to shine for you. Asterisks, the wandering cooks and the bread that sang. Asterisks, somewhere between the bogs and the bell towers, there walked a woman with ash on her apron and a bundle of rosemary. Tied to her staff, her name was Gullion. No one knew where she came from. Some said the forests, others whispered the east. But everyone remembered how her food tasted. Different. She traveled with a dented pot, a small sack of flour, and a voice like melted butter. She never stayed long, only cooked a single meal for each village that welcomed her, and always, always, people wept when they ate it. Not because it was grand, but because it tasted like something. Asterisk in the village of Ulanmir, where soup was normally gray and thick as fog, she baked a small loaf of bread, used herbs no one recognized, sang to the dough, yes. She sang. Her song was wordless, but warm. A melody that curled like rising steam. The villagers watched in silence as she pulled the loaf from the hearth. Its crust was golden, its scent wild and unfamiliar. And when she broke it open, it sighed like it had been waiting to breathe. Asterisk, they ate in reverent hush. Even the children, who normally made faces at turnips, closed their eyes and smiled. One old man said, "I remember this from before I was born," and Gallian only smiled, her eyes reflecting stars that hadn't yet arrived, because she knew. The starlight was close now, very close. Asterisk far above, the star's warmth reached the low atmosphere. A silent hello felt not in the sky, but in the hearts of those who had forgotten flavor. It was not magic. It was time, time for light to find mouths again. Time for the earth to remember how to taste. The star didn't know Gallian, but somehow they sang the same tune, a song for dew, for life, for hunger that never gave up. Asterisk, Gale left that night, as she always did, with her pot clanking gently at her side. No coin, no thanks, only whispers in her wake. She made the bread sing. She put the wind in the stew. She tasted like memory. And in the ashes of her fire, they found a note scrawled in soot. Flavor is not found, it is remembered. Asterisk in other villages, others like her wandered. An old man who roasted pine needles and made children laugh with honey ash cakes. A barefoot boy who brewed masti that cured sadness for half a day. A widow who fried nettles and told stories that tasted better than meat. The world was still hungry, but it was starting to hum. Asterisk and above, our star burned brighter still, not greedily, not proudly, but gently, like a cook leaning over the pot to make sure no flavor had fled. Its light began to fall on barley fields, warmed the backs of sheep, reflected in the soup of monks no one noticed. Not really, but they smiled more when they ate. They seasoned with hope. And in Thornwick, Lady Marta whispered, "I swear this turnip tastes like sunlight." And maybe it did. Asterisk rest now, dreamer, Close your eyes with the scent of rising bread curling through your thoughts. Sleep with the soft weight of rosemary on your chest. We'll return tomorrow to listen to the hunger of royalty and the first kitchens that dared to fry, and the star will still be shining, always, the grease of gold and the frying of the future. Once there was only boiling water, gray and solemn, tugged flavor out of vegetables until nothing was left but steam and sadness. But then, somewhere between a castle and a cobbler's hut, someone dropped a scrap of dough into oil, and it sang, a hiss, a crackle, a golden bloom of heat. Not loud, not angry, just enough to make the cook stop, blink, and wonder, what if food could dance? Asterisk, they had no word for it. No recipe, no name. Only a moment where scent curled up like smoke and hearts leaned forward to breathe it in. The fried scrap, crisp and strange, tasted of everything the village had forgotten. Not sweet, not savory, just alive, like a secret passed down from stars. 2 tongues, asterisk, in the manor house of Highmarsh. The cook's apprentice, a girl named Sila, watched this mystery with wide eyes. She'd never fried anything. Frying was dangerous. Oil was rare. Grease was gold. But she couldn't forget that sound. So late one night, the spoonful of tallow stolen from the roast. She heated a shallow pan and dropped in a piece of old bread. It sizzled, bubbled, darkened, and she gasped, not in fear, but joy. The smell wrapped around her, full and strange, like a song hummed by someone long gone. She tasted it, and for a moment, everything else disappeared. Asterisk above her, the star smiled, or would have if stars had mouths. Its light now bathed the earth in ripples warming stone walls, melting old frost and slipping into kitchens like a guest no one expected, but everyone welcomed. It saw Scylla's eyes. It saw the bubbling pan. It saw the future, not one of kings and banquets, but of quiet, brave invention. Asterisk soon, whispers spread. Did you hear about the girl who cooked with oil? She made the bread crisp. It crunched, I swear it. And just like that, in taverns and towers alike, frying began. Not every day, not for everyone, but sometimes. When hope outweighed scarcity, food found a new voice. The voice of golden crusts. The voice of heat wrapped in joy. The voice of flavor set free. Asterisk, even King Alderic tasted it. He was served something small, a sliver of root fried in goose fat. The court expected him to spit it out, but he didn't. He chewed, swallowed, then whispered, more. His cooks exchanged glances. They'd never heard that word before. Asterisk, the change was slow, like starlight through deep space. But it came, and with each crisped edge, each browned bite, each hush that followed the first mouthful, food became less like survival and more like music. Asterisk, the star pulsed happily now, its rays caught in breadcrumbs, its warmth folded into dough. No one knew it was responsible. No one looked up and said, "Thank you," but it didn't mind. Stars don't need praise. They only need to shine. Asterisk, so sleep now, dreamer of flavor. Drift into the sound of quiet sizzling. Feel the comfort of warmth, of change, of something better just beginning. Tomorrow, we'll walk through the sweet shops of the future, where sugar first arrived and where joy became edible. And yes, the star will still be watching. Always, asterisk, the sugar that whispered sweet lies, asterisk, before sugar. There was honey, wild, temperamental, gathered from bees that bit back. It was rare and golden, a gift, not a given, but sugar. Sugar was something else. It came quietly, first by ship, then by rumor, then by price. No one knew what it was. They called it white gold, soul salt, sweet dust. It looked like snow that refused to melt. It sparkled like powdered starlight, and for a world so starved for joy. A baker named Emery opened a wooden crate and found sugar for the first time. He touched it like it might vanish, licked his finger, froze, then laughed, then cried, because no fruit, no honey, no wine, no berry had ever tasted like this. It didn't just sweeten, it rewrote the tongue. It made bread taste like memory, made porridge sing, made even sadness blush. Asterisk, the villagers lined up. He had only enough to sprinkle, so he rationed it, one soft dusting per loaf. Each bite was met with silence, then sighs, and then those dangerous words, "We want more." Asterisk, above them, the star still burned. Its light, already touching leaves and stones, now found its way into sugar crystals on wooden shelves, tiny prisms, tiny suns. It didn't know what sugar would become, only that it was beautiful, and beauty always carries risk. Asterisk, because with sugar came forgetting. For a time, people stopped tasting vegetables, stopped thanking bread. They wanted more sparkle, more frosting, more thrill. And sugar gave it so easily, so endlessly, that they forgot how to savor. Asterisk, the nobles demanded candied fruit, jellied meats, desserts shaped like animals and angels. They built sugar castles, sugar tombs, sugar crowns, even peasants. When they could afford a grain, licked it from their fingers like it was sin and salvation at once. And it was, because sugar did not soothe hunger. It painted over it. It whispered, "You are not empty, even when you were." Asterisk, the monks, weary, called it the white ache. The midwives, gentler, used it in medicine. And the children simply loved it, because it made the world less gray dot. And sometimes that's all that matters. Asterisk, but beneath the sweetness, a quiet hunger remained, the kind that sugar could not cure, the kind that lived deeper in meaning, in the warmth of soup shared on a cold night. For sweetness without salt is just shadow. Light without weight, like a star seen from afar, but never felt. Asterisk, and so the star continued to shine, not just light, but balance, not just warmth, but memory. It watched as sugar spread, as joy grew, as greed followed. It offered no judgment, only radiance, for even lies, when whispered sweetly, can teach us what truth sounds like. Asterisk, sleep now, little listener. Taste the sugar that lingers on your dreams. But hold space, too, for broth, for bread, for the quiet company of honest food tomorrow. We'll wander through taverns and kitchens where fire meets flour, and the first true meals begin to find their names, and yes, the star will still be there, watching you chew in wonder. The first real meals before there were cookbooks, before menus or markets, before chefs had names, there were hands, and there was fire. That was all. A bowl, spoon, a stone pot bubbling beside a stone heart, and into it they dropped what they had. Not much, but it was enough. Asterisk, a turnip, soft from frost, a clove of garlic, thin as a whisper, a handful of barley, half-washed, but full of hope and water. Always water, then salt, if they had it. Then time was the secret spice no one named. Time stirred the stew when no one else could. Time whispered flavor into the cracks. Asterisk, and as the pot warmed, as steam rose like a quiet spirit, they waited, not impatiently, not with hunger clawing dot, but with expectation, like a story was being told in heat. Asterisk, the first real meals weren't planned. They happened in moments between work and worry, between birth and burial, between everything hard and everything worth surviving for. A meal was not food. It was pause dot, and when shared, it became peace. Asterisk, in a stone cottage beneath the cliffs. Their mother was gone, their father distant, but he had a spoon, and he had a plan. He tore stale bread into the pot, crushed herbs with a rock, poured what little oil they had like a blessing. When his sister asked what it was, he said, "It's called something better." They laughed, they ate, and in that moment, they were whole. Asterisk, that is what a meal is. Not full bellies, but full hearts. Not taste, but togetherness. Even if the food was thin, even if it was scorched, even if it was only for tonight, it still mattered. Because it said, "You are not alone." Asterisk above. The star pulsed low and long. Its light now curled into fireplaces, tucked itself into kettles, snuck inside onions as they softened. It had witnessed many things: war, frost, silence, but never this. This sacred act of sitting down, passing bowls, and saying nothing at all, just chewing, just being. That was real. Asterisk in the castle kitchens. The cooks began experimenting, not because the lords asked, but because they hungered for flavor, for joy, for a kind of beauty only the poor knew. They roasted, they boiled, they mixed wine into sauces and called it noble. But the true food, it was still in the cottages, in the villages, in the quiet. Asterisk, and in time, people began to gather around food for reasons beyond hunger. They met to celebrate, to mourn, to gossip, to heal. Bread broke, stories rose, laughter stirred in like pepper, and a real meal was born. Asterisk, so sleep now, little listener. With steam in your lungs and salt on your lips, know this: you carry in you every meal ever shared, every soup that saved a soul, every bite that meant I love you when the words were too heavy. Tomorrow we'll step into the kitchens of queens and poisoners, where spices changed history, and flavor became a weapon and a wonder. And yes, the star will still be burning, warming the broth of dreams, spices, scandals, and the fire beneath the tongue. Once the wind smelled of nothing, just cold, just earth, just the breath of stones. But one day, the breeze changed. It came from the east, carrying cinnamon like smoke, pepper like thunder, and cloves like tiny, sharp stars. People smelled it before they saw it, and when they did, they never looked away again. Asterisk spices were magic. They could turn rot into feast, make old meat taste young, make bland bread bloom in your mouth like a field in spring dot. But they were more than that. They were secrets. They were currency. They were scandal. For who owned the spices owned the story. Asterisk, ships crossed cruel oceans. Caravans trudged over dunes, all to carry little boxes, no bigger than books, full of things that burned, canned, and healed, and dazzled the tongue. And in each box, a fortune, a war, a lie, because no one told the truth about spices, not where they came from, not how many died to get them, not who deserved them. They just sprinkled them and smiled. Asterisk, in the manner of Lord Belwyn, a single nutmeg costs more than a servant's year of labor. He didn't know how it tasted. He didn't care. He shaved it onto his goose because his rival hadn't yet. That was the game now. Food wasn't about hunger. It was about having. Asterisk, but beneath the gold platters, in the hidden rooms of apothecaries and wise women, spices still served the old ways, warming the sick, soothing the sorrow, lacing bread with hope. And sometimes, just sometimes, they did darker work. Poison, after all, was just spice with intent. Asterisk Queen, Marilla's cook, knew this. He had fingers like violin, strings and eyes that saw too much. He stirred saffron into soup like a prayer. But he also hid powders in the wine. When commanded, he did not smile, only tasted and dreamed of simpler stews. Asterisk, the star above had watched flavors be born before on alien worlds, in boiling seas of methane and stone. But here, on Earth, spice had become a kind of music, not a song of joy, but of control. Still, it shimmered. Still, it danced on the tongue, and the star pulsed gently, reminding the planet below. Even the fiercest fire can warm a home if held with care. Asterisk, for not all spice was sinister. In a village kitchen, far from courts, a grandmother mixed cumin and garlic into a stew, so fragrant it made a crying child smile again. She didn't know trade routes. She didn't know empire. She just knew flavor and love, and how sometimes a warm spice in a cold world was enough to survive another day. Asterisk, so sleep now, little one, with cinnamon dreams and peppered stars above. Let your thoughts drift along, caravan, trails and over ocean mists, where flavor is still a mystery, and every taste tells a tale. Tomorrow we'll wander into darker places still, castles where famine dressed as feasts, and illusions sat on silver plates, and yes, the star will still burn, its spice eternal. The illusion of feasts, the room glowed like a dream. Gold cups, gilded birds, long tables stretching like roads to nowhere. Laughter echoed off stone walls, but no one truly laughed. Only mouths moving like masks. This was a feast, but not for eating, for showing. Asterisk. There was a time when a banquet meant abundance, warmth, The harvest returned in joy, but not here. Not now. Now it was theater. A performance where the food was painted, posed, and praised, but never truly touched. Asterisk, a swan, roasted whole, redressed in its own feathers. Its beak lacquered in gold leaf, its body hollow inside, stuffed with dreams, maybe, but not meat. Asterisk, pies shaped like castles. Fish served with their scales burnished in wine. Peacocks whose plumage had been saved, dried, and pinned back on after death. All for awe, none for hunger. People clapped before they chewed, because the chewing didn't matter. Asterisk, there were courses, 10, 12, even 30, each more delicate than the last, each more pointless. A sugar sculpture of a night, a jelly shaped like a cathedral. Bread baked so light, it vanished in the hand like smoke. But outside, the peasants were chewing bark. Asterisk, the illusion of feasts was not just in food. It was in power. To pretend you were full was the highest. Luxury. To ignore the growling in the belly meant you'd won. Because winning wasn't eating, it was denying that you needed to. Asterisk, in the banquet hall of King Aldemar. Servants starved in the rafters, watching meat decay untouched on silver platters. They weren't allowed to eat. Not even the scraps. Scraps were for dogs and appearances. Asterisk, but far away, in a forest clearing lit by moonlight, a thief roasted a rabbit over a low flame. His cloak was torn, his fingers black with soot. But he fed 3 children with that rabbit and gave them the better pieces. No gold, no audience, but a true feast. Asterisk feasts, you see, aren't measured by applause. They're measured by silence, the kind that follows. A warm bite after a long day. The kind that sighs instead of speaks. That's a feast, not illusion, but presence. Asterisk, above, the stars swell softly, watching the castles crumble inside themselves. All that gold, all that pageantry, dust on the tongue. But far below, in quiet huts and crooked shelters, the embers still glowed red, still cooked. Truth still fed life. Asterisks, so close your eyes, little one. Tonight's banquet is in your dreams, a bowl of stew you don't have to share, a loaf still warm from the hearth, a seat where no one judges. Feast there, let false grandeur fade. Let sugar sculptures melt tomorrow. We rise again into the alchemist's kitchen, where food became medicine and taste tried to heal the body and spirit alike. And yes, the star will still burn, boiling a better future in its light. Asterisk, when food became medicine. Asterisk, before there were doctors and gowns, before silver instruments gleamed. There were women with baskets and kitchens that hummed like bees. They did not wear crowns. They did not speak Latin, but they knew what time could do to a sick child's chest. Asterisk in the village of Ethermere. Every path led to old Mags. She had 3 teeth, 10 cats, and a laugh that could warm the rain. She cooked with a purpose, not to impress, but to mend. On her shelf, not spices, but friends. Marjoram for sleep, fennel for wind, sage for grief that wouldn't leave the bones. Asterisk, a bowl of her broth could bring a man back from war, at least in spirit, not because it was rich, not because it was rare, but because it was seen, made with hands that listened, eyes that noticed shadows in skin, and maybe, just maybe, a whisper of something more from the forest. Asterisk in monasteries. The monks crushed plants with stone, not for stew, but for tinctures and tea. Their gardens were libraries of scent. Their soups, long prayers, and sometimes, when the bell rang at dusk, you could hear them thank the basil like it had spoken. Asterisk food wasn't just fuel. It was story, remedy, and spell. The difference between soup and potion. Only intent, one fed the belly, the other, the ache behind the eyes. Asterisk, but not everyone trusted this quiet power. Witches, they whispered. These women with their nettles and roots. These monks with their books of cures. And so, fires were lit, and knowledge turned to smoke, and food, sweet, simple, sacred food, was silenced for a time. Asterisk still. The earth remembered. Still, the dandelion grew by the gate. Still, mint crept between stones. Still, the garlic waited underground like a secret, because healing never really leaves. It only hums softer until you learn to listen again. Asterisk up above, the star curled inward. A red giant, now heavy, thoughtful. Its own medicine, perhaps, was time it had burned long. Loved hard, and soon it would burst. But not yet. There was still warmth left to give. So rest, little dreamer. Imagine your blanket is lavender, and the night tuck you in with warm broth and quiet lullabies, for tomorrow we shall follow the famine roads where healing was needed, but hunger was louder, and still the star will shimmer, even in silence, even in sickness, even in sleep. The roads of hunger, it began with a cloud, too large, too still. Then the rains came and stayed until the sun forgot its name. Peas curling like promises, but now they drowned. The roots could not breathe. The grain would not grow, and the people began to walk. Asterisk, they left homes that no longer hummed, left hearths that had forgotten how to flame, carried sacks of seeds like cradles with no child, and they walked to other villages, to other hopes, to any rumor of bread. Asterisk, mothers stopped counting meals. They counted days, and then bones. A potato, once humble, became legend. A crust, once tossed, became holy, and still the sky wept. Asterisk, in a village called Hollowmere, a boy named Finn tried to plant dreams. He pressed beans into mud with his cold fingers, sang to them, begged them, but nothing came. Only silence. Only the wind, too tired to sing back. Asterisk, hunger makes everything louder. A door creaking open. A dog barking in the distance. A baby's cry becoming a bell that never stops ringing. But the worst sound, the pot when it's empty. Again and again, asterisk people whispered stories of lands where the wheat still danced, of kings with stores of honeyed grain, of saints who turned stones into soup dot. But those were stories, and on the road only your shadow walked with you. Asterisk, in the monasteries, the bells still tolled, not for prayer, for death, too many names, too many to bury, but some monks with cracked hands still stirred what little they had. Turnips, nettles, hope. Asterisk, one day, a girl in rags found a snail. She boiled it in tears and gave half to her brother. That was a feast. That was love, because love does not ask for fullness, only sharing. Asterisk, the road stretched like veins across a starving land. And the people became stories, and the stories became echoes, but still, they walked because hunger does not stop you, it moves you. Asterisk, above them, the star pulsed. It knew this ache, this collapse, this quiet falling inward, for it too would one day swallow itself, but in its dying came the seeds of new galaxies. Asterisk, so sleep, gentle listener. Let hunger drift behind your eyelids, not as pain, but as memory. Tonight, your dreams are full, your fields green, your table whole dot, and tomorrow we'll visit the twisted kitchens of the noble elite, where too much food could be just as cruel as too little, where excess was another kind of emptiness, and still the star watches, not judging dot, only glowing. The nobleman's curse, the peasants had none. The nobles had too much, but even golden bread can turn to ash in a lonely mouth. Asterisk, in Castle Merrilight. The tables bowed beneath peacocks, pies shaped like fish, and roasted apples stuffed with cloves. Perfumed hands plucked delicacies. Silken sleeves wiped crumbs onto floors scrubbed by silence, and still no one smiled. Asterisk, there was a Lord Alberon, the plump. They called him that behind curtains. He wore fur in summer. He sweat wine. He laughed only once a year, because nothing tasted like joy when joy had gone. Asterisk, he had chefs from 5 kingdoms. They made towers of sugar, swan-shaped puddings, and pies with jewels inside. He had not touched a turnip in years, not kissed a potato with salt. He did not know hunger, but he feared it, so he fed and fed until food was not pleasure. It was armor, asterisk, down the table. Lady Circel dabbed her lips with lace. She had eaten a fig, then hidden her plate beneath the cloth to stay lovely, to stay light. But her eyes held the same hunger as the boy on the road eating snails. Because hunger lives where honesty dies. Asterisk, a bard once sang of soup so rich it could buy a village. The nobles laughed, not because it was funny, but because it wasn't. They drank from horns, gnawed sugar sculptures, and spoke in riddles, so no one knew they were lonely, asterisk, in the kitchens below. A girl stirred a pot of bones and whispered a lullaby to it. She would not taste the roast, but she would lick the spoon, and her joy was real. Because scraps, given freely, fill more than gold on cold plates. Asterisk, Lord Alberon died with a pheasant in his hand and no one holding the other. His last breath smelled of cinnamon, but not kindness, not love. Asterisk, above, the red giant star began to waver, its warmth bloated, its light slow. A curtain call, a breath before collapse. Because even stars can have too much of themselves, and then they fold. Asterisks, so rest, little one. Let feasts fade from your thoughts. Let the banquet vanish and the moon rise over quiet fields again. For in our next dream, we drift into the markets of spice and noise, where flavor first returned to the earth, and the tongue remembered joy. And still the star watches, heavy, glowing, kind, asterisk, the spice roads, asterisk, before there were borders, there were scents, and before there were nations, there were roads, not roads of stone, but of sand and song and stories. Asterisk, they called it the spice road, but it was more than pepper and clove. It was silk in the air, warmth in your bones, and hope beneath 1,000 stars. Asterisk, the food in medieval kitchens was gray, brown, and boiled to silence. But here, on these roads, flavor was a language without kings. Asterisk, traders, moved like migrating stars, each carrying sun-dried threads of saffron. Cinnamon curled like bark from a dreaming tree, and pepper sharp as laughter. They brought heat to cold places, color to pale bowls, and magic to the mouths of the tired. Asterisk, but the spice was not cheap. Oh no, to taste something warm and far away was a privilege, a golden dream for those who could afford it. For the rest, turnips. Again, asterisk still. Some peasants saved a year's coin for a single spoonful of spice, a flick of taste on a wedding day, a dot of warmth on a child's name night, because some flavors aren't for the tongue, they're for the soul. Asterisk, in the city of Talsamara, a boy once chased a saffron thread as it danced on the wind. He caught it, tasted it, and dreamed of sand dunes so wide they swallowed the sun and gave it back in gold. Asterisk, but not all spices were free. Some traveled on the backs of the broken, caravans guarded by blades, souls traded for salt, because even dreams can be chained and sold. Asterisk still, the spices came, crossed mountains, melted borders, slipped through sieges and snow, because flavor, like love, finds a way. Asterisk, and in their scent, ginger, nutmeg, turmeric, the medieval world stirred awake. A dish changed. A table smiled. Just a little, just enough. Asterisks above, the star trembled. Its edges frayed. Its gravity grew tired. It was not long now, but even as it aged, its light reached these roads, lit the spices in traders' hands, made them glow like embers wrapped in parchment. Asterisk, so sleep, little listener. You have followed the scent to the heart of a world once flavorless, and tomorrow we wander into winter kitchens where boiling stew was both shield and comfort, and stories were the salt in every bowl. The star still watches, old now, but burning, and so do you. The stew that saved the village in winter, even. Time moved slower, as though the snow weighed down the clocks. In a village unnamed, curled against the ribs of the mountains, the world had boiled down to three things: cold, hunger, hope. Asterisk, the food was gray. So was the sky. So were the hearts. But in the center of the village, inside a leaning, smoky house, there stood a pot, iron, black, older than anyone could remember. And in it, stew. Asterisk, not the kind you'd crave, mind you. No spices, no meat, just roots, and roots of roots, and water that had whispered with stones. But every night it fed them, and that was magic. Asterisk, there was a girl, Lina, with red threaded mittens, She stirred the pot each evening with a wooden spoon carved by her grandfather. Each time she stirred, she told a story, because food without story is just fuel. And no soul wants only that. Asterisk, once she said, "This turnip was once a prince. He rolled downhill to escape his crown and landed in our stew." They laughed. Even the frost paused to listen, and the stew somehow tasted better that night. Asterisk, they had no sugar, no butter, no feast days with pies stacked high, but they had each other. And one pot. The trick, Lina would whisper, was not to empty it. Add a little. Take a little dot, always leave something behind. Asterisk, one winter, the road froze shut. No carts came, no grain, bellies shrank. Eyes dulled, but the stew remained, because even a whisper of broth is louder than silence when it carries love. Asterisk, the village learned how to share, how to soften bark, how to grind acorns and catch snow. They became alchemists of survival, and that stew, it became legend. Asterisk, they say, if you visit that pot now, on a night when the wind forgets its name, you can still hear Lina's stories rising in the steam, and the spoon stirs by itself. Just once, just enough. Asterisk, above them, the great star blinked, its edges glowing faint, its breath shallow, a supernova waiting to exhale. But not yet, not yet. It watched the stew, and it remembered warmth. So rest, dear dreamer. Curl beneath your covers like moss beneath a root. For in the next dream, we will visit the monks, those quiet keepers of cheese and ale, who brewed secrets in stone halls and fed silence to the soul. The star still watches. Soon it will sigh, but now it glows for you. Asterisk, monks, bread, and the silence of cheese. Asterisk, in the belly of a mountain, a monastery slept stone bones. Cold breath, windows like whispers, and within its stillness, asterisk, bread was born. Monks walked in silence, not as a vow, but as a song. Every step was prayer, every kneading of dough a ritual older than their robes. They knew hunger, but not panic, because in their world, patience was the first spice. The food was plain, on purpose, no cinnamon, no sugar, just flour, water, air, and time. Like stars waiting to shine. The bread rose slowly. They baked round loaves, dark as the earth, dense, yes, but honest. Chew long enough, and you taste sun, soil, and sweat, not delicious, but true. And the cheese. Ah, the cheese didn't melt on your tongue like modern things. It fought you like a riddle in your mouth. Salt, silence, cave, it aged in corners where bats once whispered. It aged like monks aged, slowly, quietly, wisely. Some wheels turned sharp, others wept inside. Each one was a sermon, and none of it came easy. No refrigeration, no digital thermometers, just instinct, cool stone, and a prayer to the mold gods. Sometimes it bloomed, sometimes it failed, but always they tried again. A monk named Benut once said, "Even cheese, like man, must rot a little before it ripens." They didn't laugh. They nodded and passed the bread. The meals were quiet. Meals were quiet. Spoons scraped bowls like bells. The wind pushed through long corridors, smelling faintly of yeast and wax. And somewhere, a mouse chewed history. Was it good? Not by today's tongue, but back then, bread was a friend, cheese a philosopher. Together, they taught endurance. And when they shared it with strangers on the road, even the blandness tasted like mercy. Above, the star trembled. Its gravity began to sag. A wrinkle formed in its light. But still, it warmed this mountain. Still, it smiled on loaves and lonely monks. It understood quiet, so drift now, sweet sleeper. For in our next journey, we'll cross the moors to the castles and keep fires, where meat's roasted, but only for the rich. And the poor watched with hollow eyes. The star still watches, older, gentler, nearer asterisk feasts of the few. Famine for the many asterisk beyond the monastery walls, where prayers were flower and time. Stood a castle, a stone wolf with teeth of towers, and inside a banquet. The food here was not gray. It shimmered with grease. It glistened with spices sailed in from stars. Peacocks roasted whole, swans stuffed with dates, meat pies shaped like dreams. It was art. It was waste. It was hunger painted gold. The lords laughed. They chewed through afternoons, wiped their fingers on velvet, tossed bones to dogs and scraps to the air. Their wine was redder than their banners. Their spoons were silver, their stomachs unapologetic, and outside was mud, a world of bark and barley, where children counted turnip skins, where broth was thinner than the wind, where bread was mostly hope. A woman named Mira once watched the castle every night from a hill of thistles. She'd whisper to the flames in the windows, "Just one crust from my boy." But the windows blinked shut. The torches yawned, and the feast did not shrink. This was the age when food had borders, when wealth tasted like honey and poverty, like boiled nettles, no middle, just feast or famine, roast or rot, and yet they both went to sleep hungry. One in soul, one in belly, for no matter how many pies the Lord sliced, they never tasted gratitude. And no matter how many roots the poor boiled, they never tasted fairness. The world was split by walls, by spice, by coin, by hunger. A knight once tried to fix it. He gave away his sausages, built a soup wall in the square. They laughed at him, called him Sir Simmerpot. But when winter came, his pot never emptied. Even royalty came knocking, and he fed them too, quietly, without scorn. They say his soup tasted like memory, like a childhood without fear. And when he died, they buried him with his ladle. A relic now, a holy thing, used only in stories. Above them, the star dimmed further, a faint rattle in its breath, a flutter behind its glow. It saw the rich bloated with sugar, and the poor bloated with air. It sighed a long, tired sigh. But still it watched, so rest again, gentle listener. You have walked among lords and ghosts. You have tasted their spoils and their silence in the next dream. We will ride to the coast, to the sea villages, where salt ruled and fish were both fortune and famine. The star still burns, but softer now. For you, asterisks, salt, sea smoke, and the price of a fish, asterisk, the sea did not give. She loaned her gifts, slippery, her moods colder than death, but still they prayed to her with nets, with silence, with salt rubbed into cracked palms. In little cliff villages, food was measured in tides. A good catch, you feast a storm. You chew dried dreams. They dried fish on racks thin, brittle as paper prayers, not delicious, not even pleasant, but it filled the whole. Sometimes, just barely. Salt was the sea's second bite. It preserved, it burned. It made fish last through winters and worries. But salt was gold here, and gold did not come cheap. To buy it meant selling shoes or sheep. And still the fish stank. A boy named Ewan once caught a glowing squid. He thought it was magic. He showed it to the village, eyes wide, hearts hungry. They boiled it that night, tasted like boots, but they laughed anyway. No oil, only smoke, cracked clay and hope. They grilled over driftwood, wrapped fish in seaweed, seasoned with stories. Dinner became theater, not because it tasted good, but because it happened. The old woman, Mary, swore by eel stew. She'd whisper spells into her pot, as if flavor came from rhymes. Maybe it did, because somehow her stew always brought silence, not from disgust, but from awe. The sea was cruel, but it taught rhythm. You rose with her, sank with her. She gave you food, but made you earn it. And if you grew too proud, she took it back with wind, with waves, with names carved into wood. Still, they sang to her fishermen's lullabies, lines cast like verses, because even hunger was better with song. And when the fish failed and bellies growled like gulls, they ate moss, lichen, and the soft roots of memories. A sea of alamus tays above, the star pulsed, dimmer now, heavier. Its light reached the coast, touching the masts of tired boats. It saw them praying with their nets, and it understood stars know hunger too, the kind that swells from within. So lay down your sail, wanderer of dreams. You've drifted far tonight. Next, we step into the forests, where mushrooms grew like secrets and pigs hunted for treasure underground. The starlight still follows, quieter, gentler, ever watching. A candle in the cold, you've wandered through the shadowed feasts of kings and peasants, pigs and dreams. You've tasted bitter roots and smoky fish, heard songs hummed over empty bowls, and felt the ache of centuries behind quiet eyes. But now, it is time to rest. Let the cold stew of the past settle. Let the empty plates fade. Let the hush of the medieval wind become no more than a whisper against the window pane of your thoughts. For the star has reached its final breath. Its light, once golden and bold, now dims to the color of ash and ember. A supernova, not of flame, but of peace. It bursts silently across the sky of your mind, scattering stardust over every famine, every burnt crust, every hungry child you met along the way. And from that stardust sprouts a new dream, one where bread is warm and always shared, where spices don't cost kingdoms, where no one weeps for soup, where the only hunger is for laughter, and the only currency is kindness. You see it now, don't you? That sleepy village, glowing softly, table set in the moonlight, bread, cheese, and apples, simple but plenty. You are there, not as a knight, not as a peasant, just as a soul, full, safe, warm. And so ends this tale, not with a scream or a sermon, but with a sigh, because sometimes when food was bad and nights were worse, the dream was all they had, and now so do you. Good night, dear dreamer. Sleep well, asterisk.